Okay, so we have attorney Lou Shapiro standing by. Lou, thank you so much for joining us on this big day.
With you.
Okay, well, let's just start off. Does the verdict surprise you?
No, the verdict does not surprise, I don't think, anybody that's been following this trial, even if they haven't been following it closely. The video in this case was so disturbing, it was so offensive to the core, that it really came as no surprise that the jury reached the most severe of the three charges that they could in this case.
What do you think the sentencing, and where do you think the judge is going to go with the sentencing? I mean, it spanned a range of 12 to 40 years for these charges.
Right. So when we hear terms like 40 years max, we have to keep in mind that that type of sentence is reserved for someone that has a criminal record, a repeat offender. The max really does not come into play in this case, even though this was a high-profile case, egregious conduct, and so forth. We have to remember that a judge will look at the background and history of the defendant. Do they have good character? Have they served the community? Do they have family? And here we have an officer that probably has no criminal record, probably can make many arguments in sentencing that he has done his best to serve the community. So in light of that, I think the judge is going to feel very torn, where you have the court of public opinion demanding something in the double digits, but you have the judge on the other end with the good character they normally would sentence someone to some probably in the single digits. So it remains to be seen.
I mentioned sentencing in 8 weeks, but leading up to that, the defense has time to write a written argument. This case isn't over, and they're going to appeal, correct?
Generally, there are appeals in every case, but judging from the way this trial went, the judge was very careful to consider what evidence would come in, what jury instructions would be given. He was always admonishing the jury, do not watch the news, do not listen to what you're hearing. So I think from an appeal perspective, it's not going to be easy for the defense.
What about Chauvin's reaction, as you've sat in many of these courtrooms, when a person's life is changed forever? Obviously, he had no emotion. So maybe it's shock. I mean, we never know what's going on inside one's head, but he stood and then he was let out in handcuffs.
I'm sure his attorneys braced him for this. Once a verdict came in, anyone who's done this for some time could tell you it was not going to be an acquittal. So his lawyers would have braced him for a worst possible case scenario. He knew he was going to go into custody with a conviction, and he's going to take it from here.
How do you think the defense did mounting their case, leaning on the health aspects of George Floyd?
The defense had a very difficult case to work with. A lot of people came down on the defense for some of the arguments they were making. But the public has to remember, a defense attorney is required and mandated by the U.S. Constitution to provide the most zealous defense possible. And if there's even, a defense that may seem a little bit far-fetched, but as long as it's something that should be argued, they must argue it, obviously keeping it into the realm of reality as they're doing it. But they did their best. I don't know that they could have done any better with this type of case. With this video, it's very rare we have a case where the whole crime, A to Z, is on video. So with that, they didn't have much to work with.
And Floyd killed during an arrest after a store clerk alleged that he had passed a counterfeit $20 bill in Minneapolis there. Chauvin, though, one of 4 police officers who arrived there on scene. And those other 4 officers there, or the 3 others, I guess, that they're going to have their day in court as well.
Yeah, well, you can expect now, after they saw how quickly the verdict was rendered here and the evidence that was presented, I think we're going to be seeing some more pleas coming down the road. I don't think they're going to want to roll the dice, even if they are looking at less charges or maybe they were a little less culpable. It's not a pretty trial to go into.
Wow. We'll see what unfolds with that. And again, the judge there, as you mentioned, he had warned jurors not to allow bias, prejudice, passion, sympathy, or even public opinion to influence their decision as they weighed Chauvin's fate. I guess at this point we can wait for the jurors to talk about this, but it must have been a very difficult thing to do because this was so out there in the public. They were not sequestered.
Right, and the reason why they weren't sequestered is because there's no way in this day and age of technology and social media to sequester a jury. How can you tell someone you can't be on the internet for 3 weeks? So it's just not reasonable. So what we're left with is admonishments, and people are serving on juries on their honor that they will do the right thing and that they will do their best, even though they will be hearing things and seeing things in the news. You can't help it. It pops up. But they're ordered and asked, can you set it aside as this trial is going and just look at the evidence? And when they say yes, that's what they're held to do.
How do you think this is going to, the verdict here, set a precedent, I guess, in the legal world, here on out? What does this do? What does this do for social change, obviously, and legal ramifications in terms of the next court cases that come to light?
Well, it definitely sends a message to law enforcement that even if somebody is resisting, even if they feel that they have the upper hand and can do what they want, that they're being watched, they're going to be held accountable, that they do need to be up on training, they do need to follow protocol to the T, and they need to express sympathy and empathy while they are at the same time enforcing the law. And obviously that can be difficult to do in their line of work. But now they're not going to get a pass. They're going to be held accountable. And we've seen that here in this case.
Let's go over those three charges again and what specifically they were, because they sounded so similar, I guess, if you looked at it very quickly, but each carrying its own punishment. So first, the second-degree unintentional murder. What is that charge that he was found guilty of?
So the second-degree murder requires an assault, that the officer committed an underlying assault, which in and of itself caused the death. So you first have to find that an assault was committed, that a crime was committed by the officer, and that crime resulted in the death of Floyd. And a lot of legal analysts and experts thought that might be difficult to prove, that the officer, someone that is wearing the uniform, has been trained, is actually committing a crime while performing their duty. But in this case, the jury said, yeah, from what they saw, it looked like he was committing an assault. He was committing a crime. That assault led to the death of Floyd, and that's how they found him guilty on the most egregious charge of the three.
And then let's go to the second-degree manslaughter charge.
So that one is more, they call it a depraved heart, without regard to human life. You don't have to find the underlying assault in that one. You just have to find that the conduct itself was reckless. It showed that there was just no regard for human life. And the argument is that the way he was, on Floyd, on the neck, on the back, for that amount of time, when people are saying to him, he's not breathing, if that's not a conscious disregard for human life, I think many people will say, well, what is? And that's why they found him guilty of that.
And then lastly, that third-degree manslaughter charge, a guilty verdict.
Right. So the manslaughter was really more, I think, of an insurance policy for the prosecution. All it requires is negligible conduct. An officer did not meet up to their duty of care. They were negligent, and that negligence led to the death. I think everybody who watched this video thought, if people are telling you the man is dying, maybe you need to reassess your position on him at that time. So that was a gimme, I think, on the case.
Do you know much about the jury makeup, just jury selection itself, how critical of a role that obviously plays in every big trial, but the jury selection in this case and the alternates as well, which never had to be used. But talk to me about that and the importance of it.
Right. So there definitely was a diverse jury. All backgrounds and nationalities were represented on this jury. But I don't think in this particular case, the makeup of the jury made a difference in the verdict. I think regardless of who was on that jury, when you had that video and you had 9 minutes of it, so disturbing, so offensive, so difficult to watch. Most people cannot even watch the whole thing beginning to end. And this jury watched it several times, starting with opening arguments and going forward. So I think with that in mind, any jury would have found guilty on some or all the counts in this case.
What about very typical for then the I guess Chauvin to be let out in handcuffs and his bail revoked and taken into custody in a trial like this? There was no way he was going to remain on bail up until sentencing.
Right. With certain types of charges like these, when someone is convicted, there's a presumption of remand on the spot. So Chauvin knew it. Everybody in the room knew it. That's why you saw no drama at that time. It's routine procedure to do.
And it only took the jury 10 hours of deliberations to reach this verdict. And so that's, you said and spoke to the fact that the lawyers, his defense lawyers, prepped him on what was probably going to happen.
Right. I think a lot of people were wondering, why was it taking so long? The evidence seems so clear that a crime was committed. So why even the 10 hours? And I think the answer to that is there probably were some jurors who were reluctant to convict on that second-degree murder charge, the highest one. And it probably after discussions and going through the jury instructions, going through the definition of assault, how they were to find assault, they did arrive at the agreement that they were going to find him guilty on that murder charge.
Chauvin, Derek Chauvin, ex-police officer, found guilty on all 3 counts. Anything else, sir, that you would like to add? You've had such great insight, and I appreciate all the time.
No, I just think that, and I hope that now that we have some sort of closure on this, that, everyone remains safe and vigilant out there, and that we can all move on from this in a constructive and peaceful way together.
All right, Attorney Lou Shapiro, thank you so much, and we'll be talking to you again, I'm very sure, over the next few days as things play out, and definitely again when sentencing happens in 8 weeks from now.
You got it. Be well.